transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, 100 years after Jacksonville's most famous blues musician started making records, we celebrate the music and legacy of Arthur Blind Blake. Then, pushing back on climate disinformation, we'll tell you about the Sierra Club's online Truth Tellers program. And an upcoming cabaret by Bold City Opera offers a tip of the hat to the past and offers a glimpse of future performances. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways to connect with us, and you can also sign up for our new daily newsletter, which delivers program information and a sneak peek at upcoming guests to your inbox every weekday. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Russia and Ukraine are each accusing the other of violating a 3-day U.S.-brokered ceasefire that ends at midnight tonight. The pause in fighting was negotiated by President Trump. It was timed to events marking the anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. From Moscow, NPR's Charles Maines reports.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia had refrained from large-scale missile strikes, but continued attacks along the front lines, prompting Ukraine to return fire. Similarly, Russia's defense ministry accused Ukraine of launching thousands of drones into Russian airspace, to which it said Russia responded in kind. Yet there were no disruptions during Russia's military parade on Red Square Saturday, an event scaled back amid fears of Ukrainian drone strikes. During that ceremony, Russian President Vladimir Putin insisted his forces would prove victorious against an aggressive Ukraine backed by NATO, only to later suggest he remained open to diplomatic efforts to bring the war to a close. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is defending the U.S. and Israeli war with Iran. He told CBS's 60 Minutes program he did not foresee the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has blocked commercial shipping. That's triggered a world energy crisis. Despite the current ceasefire, Netanyahu says the war with Iran isn't over yet.
I think it accomplished a great deal, but it's not over because there's still nuclear material, enriched uranium, that has to be taken out of Iran. There's still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There are still proxies that Iran supports. There are ballistic missiles that they still want to produce. Now, we've degraded a lot of it, but all of that is still there, and there's work to be done.
Yesterday, President Trump rejected Iran's response to a U.S. proposal to end the war. Trump wrote online, quote, "totally unacceptable." The U.S. says that 17 Americans that were aboard a cruise ship where the rare hantavirus was found have returned to the U.S. They'll go into quarantine in Nebraska. NPR's Marie Andrusevich reports the Department of Health and Human Services says one of them has tested positive for the virus.
Officials say the individual tested positive for the Andes strain of the virus, while a second passenger is experiencing mild symptoms. All 17 Americans who are on the affected cruise ship will quarantine in Omaha at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, with the symptomatic passenger going to a separate treatment facility. All will undergo clinical evaluation. According to the CDC, symptoms can take up to 42 days after exposure to show up. The World Health Organization says the hantavirus risk to the general public remains low, and the outbreak is, quote, not the start of another COVID pandemic. Marie Andrusevich, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is 9:04. A person's dead following a deputy-involved shooting this past weekend in Clay County. The sheriff's office says deputies were called out just after 4 p.m. on Saturday to help the Florida Department of Children and Family Services investigation at a home on Pebblestone Court north of Plantation Oaks Boulevard in the Oakleaf area. Sheriff Michelle Cook says that's when deputies learned that someone in the house appeared to have an out-of-state warrant, and while deputies worked to confirm that warrant, that person grabbed 2 knives and confronted deputies.
The confrontation with the deputies ended up in the backyard of the residence, and then the subject actually knocked down a fence into a neighbor's yard where the confrontation continued. A short time later, we had a single deputy shoot the subject that was at that time armed.
That suspect died. No information on the person killed or what the warrant was for was released. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement and the state attorney's office are investigating the fatal shooting. It's going to be a warm day here in Northeast Florida. Temperatures are expected to reach the mid-80s to low 90s as we have the chance for some afternoon and evening scattered showers and storms. Lows overnight will reach the upper 60s to lower 70s. Our rain chances increase tomorrow as showers will be more widespread with some isolated storms mixed in there as well. Highs will reach the low 80s. Showers and storms become more isolated on Wednesday.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Integrative Therapeutics, maker of Cortisol Manager, a formula created by Integrative Therapeutics with the goal of supporting the body's natural stress response. Available at Amazon.com. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, 100 years of Blind Blake. Known as the King of Ragtime Guitar, we talk about his outsized legacy and the marks of the city he called home. Later in the program, combating online trolls with environmental truths. We meet the director of a new initiative to fight climate denialism. But first, Arthur Blind Blake claimed Jacksonville as home, and his blues song trace a path across the country from West Coast blues to Georgia bound. By the time of his death at age 38, he'd recorded an estimated 80 tracks. Joining us to discuss the 100th anniversary of that musical milestone, we're joined by Adonica Toller, Museum Director of the Eartha M.M. White Historical Museum and Garden. Adonica, welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. We also welcome back to the program Tim Gilmore, author, educator, and historian at Jack Psycho Geo. Good morning, Tim.
Hey, Ann.
Well, this is a legacy that is well worth remembering, and I'm glad that you're both here to help us do it. Blind Blake is really one of the most revered and distinctive guitarists of the era. But in some ways, Adonica, it seems like he's a little bit emblematic of La Villa itself, the community, because he's kind of mythologized, influential, but in some ways not fully perhaps documented, fully appreciated.
Blind Blake definitely lived the mysterious life. There's eras of his life we don't know exactly where he was. There's even kind of controversy about where he actually was born. Maybe Newport News, Virginia is another area. But he did live here, and he was influenced by the whole culture that was here in Jacksonville, especially in La Villa on Ashley Street.
Yeah. Ashley Street Blues is one of his most well-known songs, and I just want to start off here by taking a little listen to it. Tim Gilmore, Blind Blake is a favorite subject of yours. You recently wrote a post on Jack's Psycho Geo that really follows the theme of what Jack Psycho Geo is, which is, mapping these physical places that evoke a history and and an identity in some ways. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, just the map of Blind Blake in Jacksonville. What do we know about where he was, what he did when he was here, what he touched?
Well, as Adonica pointed out, he is in a lot of ways a mysterious kind of figure. People have wondered all sorts of things about the details of his life, and there are conflicting narratives about particular things. But one of the things that really interests me is the fact that you can look at city directories and you can listen to his songs. You can listen to the lyrics of his songs. Look at the names of his songs. We just heard Ashley Street Blues. I mean, Ashley Street was the center of everything that was going on musically in La Villa. He lived in a lot of places across Jacksonville. He has there's a song called Stonewall Street Blues. I drove past Stonewall Street on the way here this morning. It's in Brooklyn. He actually lived, and if you look at city directories, he lived with two different women on two different sides of Stonewall Street. He was married 5 times that we know of.
Wow.
So there's Stonewall Street Blues. You can listen to the lyrics of it, whether or not they are actually autobiographical or fictional, who knows? But he lived with, his second and his third wife on Stonewall Street. There's another song called Tampa Bound that talks about the creek flooding, and Stonewall Street backs up to McCoy's Creek. And if you've been in Jacksonville for a little while, McCoy's Creek floods a lot. And 100 years ago, it flooded way worse than it floods now. And he talks about, he says, the bridge is washed out, the wires are all down, my gal is in the flood, and I'm Tampa bound. So, again, you can't necessarily know that those are autobiographical lines, but Jacksonville streets are all over the place in his music.
Well, that's a great way to set up another song that I'd like to play. The last song that we played, Ashley Street Blues, that was performed by Leola Wilson. But this one, Tampa Bound, is performed and sung by him. So let's take a listen to Tampa Bound.
I'm going back to Tampa, to that girl I left behind. I'm going back to Tampa, to that girl I left behind. I'm going back to Tampa, just to kill my worried mind. Did you ever lie down at night, thinking about your bride? Ever lie down at night, thinking about your bride? You come it rolling and tumbling, I guess I'm Tampa bound. A bridge washed out.
So great style there. What do we know about Blind Blake's influence musically, Adonica, when it comes to his role? I mean, this was a time when a lot of Black musicians were performing, particularly in that La Villa area, that community. It wasn't always translating into mainstream culture.
Well, he is considered the king of ragtime. And even though he played the guitar, it was stated that he played the guitar as if he was playing the piano. And there's even quotes where listeners say they swear they can hear other instruments while he's playing. Dylan actually in 1992 covered one of Blind Blake's song, and there's even a literature written about the main character seeking where Blind Blake would have performed. So, and that's in 1992, then in 2000. So there's a actual series you can watch of a character seeking the spots that Blind Blake would have played. So you have major guitarists who study him even now, and other people are just they're amazed at how skilled he was. There's like he had to have picks, he had to have been doing this, because as they attempt to follow his lead, they're like, how was he doing that? So he impacted blues, jazz, ragtime. Right before ragtime became really ragtime, Blind Blake was leading that.
Remind us about the era, particularly in that Ashley Street era where your museum is, the Eartha M.M. White. There was all kinds of theaters. It was a hub of Black culture. It was a destination for artists and performers from across the country.
And actually, the Clara White Mission building was the Globe Theater, which in of itself was the anchor in the Southern music community. So what will become later called the Chitlin Circuit, if you were a Black entertainer, you were coming through the Globe Theater. You also was coming through the Colored Air Dome, which was down the street. And prior to the Globe Theater, there was the Bijou. And the Bijou was opened in 1908. Frank Crowd, it closed in 1909. He repurposed it and opened the Globe Theater. And so it was the place that you were going to come through as a Black entertainer. So Ashley Street was really, and it was advertised in the Chicago Defender. It was known that if you're going to come to Jacksonville, you're probably going through the Globe Theater.
Yeah. Tim, remind us some of the artists that came through there. I mean, some of them certainly are names that are part of history, perhaps a little bit more than Blind Blake. Jelly Roll Morton,
right?
Ma Rainey,
yep,
kind of the mother of the blues.
Those were two of the people I was going to say. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, everybody talks about Ray Charles having later, of course, been in La Villa, but a lot of this was really early in recording history, and so one of the things that's incredible about Blind Blake is that we can actually hear him, because while Ma Rainey recorded and Jelly Roll Morton recorded, certainly there are so many musicians that did not record. There was someone named Butler May who went by the name String Beans in the 19-teens, and he was known all over the country. One of the most famous musicians at the time, but he never recorded. He actually died in Jacksonville. But Blind Blake, he was here at least. As Adonica said, it's we don't know for sure where he's from. All the promotional material at the time said he was from Jacksonville, but he was probably born elsewhere. But he had been here for a number of years when, 100 years ago, 1926, he went up to Chicago, and Paramount had something called Race Records, and he started recording. Ashley Street Blues was one of the first songs, and he recorded a number of songs then with Leola Wilson also, who also went by the name Coop Brandt. She was from Birmingham, Alabama. So the fact that he recorded, and that he recorded a good bit. I mean, he's pretty prolific.
Very prolific.
Yeah, and we can listen back 100 years and hear him. It's pretty remarkable.
He was so successful. His first album, the 1926, it was so successful that they was, we got to find some other Blind Blakes. We got to find some more artists. So he really impacted the development of ragtime, blues, and jazz. He influenced all the musical forms because of his skill in playing that guitar like he was playing the piano.
And kind of a consummate entertainer, right? He was known for being very affable, very funny, engaging, and obviously a very good voice. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the legacy of Arthur Blind Blake here in Jacksonville. It's 100 years since he started recording in 1926. We're talking to historians Adonica Toller and Tim Gilmore. If you have a comment or a question or just like to join our conversation on air, you can call 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways that you can connect with us. You mentioned the Bob Dylan cover song, and that is, one mark of his influence on larger popular culture. This was the You Gonna Quit Me, which was a cover of You Gonna Quit Me Blues, and it appeared, as you said, on his 1992 album. But he's also been covered by Ry Cooder, Taj Mahal, Leon Redbone, and so his musical influence stretches to today. But at the time, this really was when we were hearing the voice of Black Jacksonville on a format that could traverse the country. It was really for the first time. This was encapsulating the sound and in many ways the spirit of the cultural scene in what's often known as the Harlem of the South. Adonica, this was the first time people were able to kind of hear that and have it travel around. And as you say, spread that influence.
Correct. So I don't think people really understand how impactful Ashley Street was and La Villa was, and even out east, because there's some of that. But it just as today you have musicians who are still studying people. Of course, we have the Johnson brothers, and you got George Leofhart and Leofhart. So it's so much, and the Ma Rainey, Pat Chappelle. Ma Rainey became Ma Rainey because she married Pa Rainey, who was one of the performers in Rabbit's Foot, which was founded in La Villa, and Rabbit's Foot still exists. It's now in Mississippi, but its roots were right here. And Pat Chappelle was a Broadway performer at the same time that the Johnson brothers were. So they knew each other. So that impact. So that's where also now the conversation is that Harlem was La Villa North, because so much La Villa went to New York. And not only that they were part of the Renaissance, they changed it, they formed it, they shaped it, they made a great impact that now we're still listening. Blind Blake. Now, most people are not familiar with him, but true musicians, especially guitarists, know who he is.
And we know, too, that his influence wasn't just something that was being felt elsewhere. There were musicians coming through here, as we mentioned, ultimately people like Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, all coming through this area and, having some exposure to that sound, possibly even meeting Blind Blake or playing with him. I mean, we don't know. Again, there's a lot of, we don't know. But he had a relatively short career when it comes down to it. I mean, we didn't hear anything of him essentially until 1920s, and then he kind of disappeared in the early 1930s.
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of those musicians that you mentioned came slightly later than he was when he was here and when he was recording. Excuse me. There's another musician named Sugar Underwood who recorded some songs. Also some songs with Jacksonville street names, the Dewdrop Alley Stomp and Davis Street Blues.
Yeah.
And Dewdrop Alley was in a part of town called Hansontown, and Blind Blake actually lived a block or two away from him at one point. Hansontown is mostly now where downtown campus of FSCJ is, but
another casualty of urban renewal.
Yes, absolutely. But it's true. So he recorded a lot for just a few years, and there's this whole kind of mythos of blues musicians a lot of time, and there's so many blind blues musicians that blindness became part of the mythos, and the fact that there were so many questions about him and what happened to him also kind of kept his biography, I think, interesting in people's minds. So there was another musician, Blind Gary Davis, thought that Blind Blake had been run over by a train.
Right.
And Big Bill Brunsey thought that he had fallen over drunk in a blizzard and froze to death. Neither of those things are true. So there were all of these different Blind Blakes that kind of fed the mystery, And it's only been a couple of years that somebody tracked down his death certificate. He had been, when he went up to play in Chicago, to record in Chicago, for a couple of years, he would come back and forth from Chicago to Jacksonville, and there's actually a couple of songs that kind of refer to his going back and forth. A song called That'll Never Happen No More does, for example. But Paramount would put its so-called race records artists up in housing in Milwaukee. And he settled in Milwaukee finally, and he married his last wife, Beatrice. And he died from tuberculosis. He had not performed in a couple of years, and he was buried in an unmarked grave and kind of forgotten. His music survived, but there were all these questions about what happened to him, and again, that kind of fed the mystery, the mythology, so to speak, of Blind Blake.
And folks watching our live stream will see that there is now a marker on
Yes,
that
there
grave.
is.
Somebody did go ahead and put one there. You mentioned that the mystery surrounding his death carried on his legacy in some ways. And Adonica sort of alluded to this earlier, but he's in a fictionalized way in a character in the TV series and the book that stars the character Jack Reacher, which is called Reacher on TV, but the book is called Killing Floor. And essentially his character inspires the action, someone searching for Blind Blake and the legacy of Blind Blake. I do want to go ahead and mention a note we got on Facebook from Jason saying, love this segment. I listen to Blind Blake regularly. The Eartha M.M. White Museum is a gem in La Villa. Everyone should visit it. I want to listen to another segment of a song by Blind Blake. This one's called The Southern Rag Geechee, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit about it and what he's singing about. So let's take a listen.
Now we're going to do the dance now. They call it the Geechee dance. I'm going to give you some music you call the Geechee music now.
One of the things that Blind Blake was known for was this incredibly intricate picking style where he would kind of keep the rhythm with his thumb and then he would use his fingers to pick out this very rapid sometimes and very complicated tune that he would play. But this song in particular is in some ways a nod to his connection. And again, we don't know a lot about it, but possibly to the Sea Islands and the Geechee Gullah community and that dialect, Adonica.
Yes. So, and what the other thing about the Gullah Geechee, so Jacksonville is a part of that. So it would have been
remind us who the Gullah Geechee
so the
are.
Gullah Geechee, so it's a combination, a culture, a combination of African, Portuguese, French, English combination. It was almost like a communication among the slaves. You're from another region, I'm from another region. We figure out how to communicate, and it formed a whole culture of food, dance, communication, even how you build your home, how you fish, how you farm. So it's a whole thing, and really the whole coast from North Carolina down to Palm Coast now. And Jacksonville and really Florida was greatly inundated when you think about the enslaved that made it to Florida, because the Spanish would not send the enslaved back to wherever they came from once they hit the Florida territory. And one of my colleagues in South Florida has documented there were 100 maroon communities in Florida. So that's the former enslaved making their way to Florida to live out in the woods somewhere, maybe among the native Indians or right outside of a plantation. They're just right. You can't reach them, but they're there. And so that would have been his influence. And Jacksonville is even right now in Jacksonville, there are Gullah Geechee communities in Arlington, Coswell, also where JU is, also where the Regency Square Mall is, Mandarin. So there's and others. There's several. So he's very well could have been influenced. And even when you hear him talk, how he sung, how he talked, you could tell he's definitely influenced by that culture.
Slipping into a little of that
Slipping
dialect.
that dialect,
Mhm.
correct.
Yeah. Tim Gilmore, I just want to ask you about that because that is something that you point out in your writings about Blind Blake on your blog.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to add much to what Adonica said, but it is. I think it's really significant that Jacksonville is this kind of southern terminus of the Gullah Geechee trail that goes into. There's not much left of it, but there was this town called Cosmo in the Arlington area, and now there is there's a sign. In the Fort Caroline area that identifies Cosmo. The Gullah Geechee are fascinating. My understanding is part of what kind of kept their culture intact was their separateness in being coastal, so that cultural isolation kept a lot of things sort of intact. So the fact that in Southern Rag, Blake is, at one point he says, "Go on, old Geechee, I ain't studying about you," and then he talks about we're going to do the Geechee dance, and he talks about Geechee music. I don't know. There may very well be, but I don't know of other music that's actually recorded from this time period that mentions Gullah Geechee. I could be wrong, and maybe somebody out there knows, or maybe Adonica knows. I don't know.
You're right. I haven't come across anything, but you're right. We don't know, but we know Blind Blake made mention of it.
Absolutely.
We also got a question just about, could you mention the importance of Genevars Hall? We haven't discussed that. Is that something that we can talk a little bit about?
Sure. Genevars Hall actually was initially, I just did some research of Jerry Urso, as you know.
Oh, yeah. Who's been on the program recently.
We were often on the phone talking, and we came across someone we were helping with their family history. We may believe that their family member may have owned the original land that sold it to the family that built Genevars Hall. So that's and we were like, I love this. But Genevars Hall, it was.
This is one building that still stands today.
It still stands today. It's gutted out. There had been attempts to restore it. But
is it on Jefferson Street?
It is on Ashley Street. It's right across from
the corner
Jefferson and
Ashley. Okay.
So there have been efforts to restore it. That building is very important because it had been a furniture store. It had been it was born It was built in 1895, and it was run by a Jewish hall. Now, Genevieve is also someone who gave land to Eartha White to build a school out at Bayard. So that's another story. But they were, because of that, they stayed connected, and so Genevieve Hall ended up being the Lenape Bar, Wynn Hotel. That is where Ray Charles was discovered. That is where the opening of the Wynn Hotel was. Ella Fitzgerald. When Louis Armstrong came to Jacksonville, he stayed there in the hotel. He said that on Ashley Street, because that's where it's happening. So he stayed there. So the impact of having someone like Louis Armstrong stay there, Ella Fitzgerald be there, Ray Charles being discovered there, it's a big part of the culture as well in the forming of music in the country.
And I want to listen to a little bit of a song called Seaboard Stomp. But Tim, you talk a little bit about his connection when he was in Jacksonville to the trains. Mm-hmm. That was a big porter culture here. Of course, that was the first union, the Red Caps that was unionized here by Philip Randolph. And so there's a rich history when it comes to trains in the Black community.
Yeah. Trains are all through his music, and absolutely, whether it's Tampa Bound or Seaboard Stomp. and he probably worked out at the. There was a year or two that he lived out east.
Yeah,
He moved from West Union Street. There was a line of shotgun houses that was demolished a couple of decades ago, but then he moved out east on Union Street also, and was probably working for the Union Terminal warehouse out there, which is now, what is it called now? It's just been restored.
These are apartments and
condos.
things. Yeah, condos, apartments.
So, but yeah, the trains are all over his music, and yeah.
And I'm going to ask Adonica to tell us a little bit more about Seaboard Stomp and maybe have us play it out. But in terms of the research that you've done, Tim, just to kind of wrap that up, obviously you've written a couple of blog posts about him. He's important to you. Just your takeaways on this 100th anniversary of his recording contribution.
He's so significant to blues history, to music history, but also to this town. And when I first started my website 14 years ago, jackpsychogeo.com, Blind Blake was one of the first subjects that I wrote about there. And I just recently wrote this newer story where I try and track him as many places as possible where he lived across Jacksonville. Growing up here, I often felt like, people say, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Well, in a very different way, it often felt like what happened in Jacksonville stayed in Jacksonville because Jacksonville just was not good at telling its story. And it seemed like there's something emblematic to me about the way that Blind Blake is known outside of Jacksonville, and yet certainly Adonica and the Ritz and the Eartha White Museum and Jerry Urso, lots of people celebrate Blind Blake, but the city itself still needs to tell its story better. There is, with all due respect to football and beaches, there's more to Jacksonville.
Yeah. Adonica, we're going to let the Seaboard Stomp play us out here. But for people who are interested, again, you run a museum where this is sort of your bread and butter. But what is it? How would you like people to learn more about this period, this artist, or just Jacksonville's influence on music and culture?
I definitely encourage you to look Blind Blake up. Listen to his music, especially if you love music. Just what we've heard today, you could hear the talent of him playing. Even what he played then, you can hear it now. It's playing. He's influenced what we hear now. So I encourage you to take the time to really research the music legacy of Jacksonville, the Black community. Also Southern rock, all that stuff. Jacksonville has not. I agree with Gilmore that we have not told our own story. Everybody else knows our story but us. And so that's why you hear people say, nothing happens in Jacksonville. Yeah, you're listening to blues, jazz. It was formulated, grown, nurtured by individuals who were here, from Blind Blake to John Rosamond Johnson and others. And the idea that Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, Jelly Roll Morton had their roots here. And when they go out, they mention that Jacksonville is a big part of their career. And children who go to Douglas Anderson School of the Arts, La Villa School of the Arts, and they don't hear about that is something that should change. I'm just saying, because if you're going to go to New York and perform, you're going to hear John Rosamond's name and James Weldon Johnson's name. Don't go be from Jacksonville and not know the people from Jacksonville that impact New York.
Yeah. Well, Adonica Toller, Tim Gilmore, great to talk to you. We're going to be back in a minute with the director of the Sierra Club's national effort to push back on climate disinformation. But as we said, let's take a listen to Blind Blake's Seaboard Stomp.
Now we're going to one of them old Seaboard Stomps. Nobody don't know how I'm going to enjoy this dance. They had a boy that they called said, come over here, I want to hear you. I want to let you hear me how I make this speedboat train come on down the line on the piano. I said, now I'm going to come and hear how you do that thing.
Welcome back. Fighting misinformation online takes, if not a village, then at least a small digital army. That's the idea behind Climate Truth Tellers, an initiative of the Sierra Club. Here to tell us about it, we're joined by the group's regional digital manager, Jennifer McCharron. Jennifer, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Ann.
So, first of all, what is the situation with misinformation online when it comes to climate change and climate realities? How is disinformation to be distinguished from misinformation?
Yes, there are two related ideas. The key difference is that misinformation might just be incorrect information, but disinformation is information that's incorrect on purpose and spread by a bad actor for a reason, usually to delay climate action, such as you can imagine in a scenario where a fossil fuel company has hired a PR firm to spread the notion that climate science is in doubt. And that helps to prop up the ability to hoard and sell and profit from fossil fuels.
And that's something, obviously, that isn't entirely new. We know that there has been years of deliberate misinformation about the impacts of burning fossil fuels or other things that have environmental impact because they're profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that primarily where that kind of disinformation or misinformation is coming from, or is it coming from bots? Is it coming from people who just are looking or attention seeking? What do you think is the primary source?
That's a great question. I don't know that we have perfect research to say because it's actually coming from all of those sources. Mm-hmm. But there are some really well-documented cases of disinformation being spread by fossil fuel PR companies. And there's a researcher named Philip Newell who has tracked specifically the issue. You may have heard of this, the idea that offshore wind harms whales. That is a full fabricated lie. And he's been able to track the spending up to $800 million of money that he's tracked back to essentially fake nonprofits that these groups have set up to promote this idea.
Astonishing.
Yeah. So some of it is very clear and able to be tracked. And a lot of it is not as easy to see. And, you know, there's disinformation that comes. Well, I think that's where you get into the, is this dis or misinformation?
Right.
So they're different.
So your efforts are aimed at pushing back and providing kind of an algorithmic defense of the truth online. Your work was recently profiled by the Yale Climate Connections shortcast, which airs on our station on Fridays during the Science Friday segment. And so congratulations on that, getting that kind of attention. But this is something that you're asking people, volunteers, to wander into a space that can be very dicey. It can be very confrontational. What is the approach that you use when it comes to pushing back on this misinformation?
Yeah, well, there's multi layers to it. So we send out an email newsletter to this group of 1,600 volunteers each week, and we offer truthful, positive posts that we recommend for them to share. And folks can click, like, comment, share. Each of those acts sends a signal to the social media algorithm that this information is good and that people are engaging with it. So people can interact with bad information, right? And send that same signal, and that's how viral disinformation spreads. So we're using the power of organizing people, which is really what we do at Sierra Club, to push a little bit more energy toward the truth, towards positive information, and see how much more of a boost we can give to it. But then we also coach volunteers, if they choose, if they're comfortable, to engage in comments with folks as well. And we try to arm folks with tactics for having those conversations that are, again, researched and proven to help those conversations go better and to actually have a chance of changing someone's mind.
Is it difficult to get people willing to wade in? There are some platforms that have become particularly toxic. X has gotten pretty ugly as a space for any kind of civil conversation. And you see people moving to platforms that are perhaps a little bit less geared towards that. And yet these conversations are happening on all of these platforms.
They are. And I think, you know, it is difficult. I mean, I see it all the time. It is difficult to muster the courage to wade into a comment battle with somebody. The advice we give is, first of all, don't get into a comment battle if you don't feel comfortable with that. If you're not, you know, you're like, I send out a post in the Climate Truth Tellers newsletter, you click in, you see a lot of bad comments, you don't have to engage. That's not the only way to help out. But if you do engage, to know that there are certain ways to do so that are more likely to help. And then try to discern, am I getting into an argument with someone who's not arguing in good faith? Maybe that's not a good idea. On the other hand, that kind of back and forth can give an algorithmic boost, but just don't do that on a disinformation post. You can get into a back and forth on positive information post because then you're showing the algorithm that the conversation is meaningful, or giving energy to it through like more comments being posted. But then if you do want to really attempt to get into a good faith argument with somebody who off the bat doesn't agree with you, there are some ways to approach that, which we try to coach people to. The main one is to not try to start by saying, "You're wrong, here are the facts." That is a recipe for ramping up the other person's defensiveness and anger. So we coach folks to say, how can you lead into that argument with your values and your values rooted in your own personal story? So we also work with folks to tell their personal story. Why does climate change matter to you? How does it affect you? How does it affect your family, your community? If you start a conversation with nearly anyone in the world on the basis of what matters most to you, and you get down to that level of having a conversation about what matters most to them, you often find that people really agree and care about the same things. Most people care about their family, their community. Most people care about nature and protecting wild lands. Everyone has to live on this planet. So it's not that difficult, really, if you can take the emotional temperature down a little bit to find ways to connect. And then from there, build on, here's what the truth really is. Here's what the research says. Here's why I believe it. Things like that.
Talk a little bit about, the issues with misinformation, disinformation, or just ugliness on social media aren't new, but AI has become more of a concern. And I think initially people were worried that it was going to be used as a piece of disinformation campaigns to spread incorrect information. I think now the concern is more that it's causing people to doubt information of all kinds. And because almost anything can be generated through AI, so you might see fake disaster videos or disaster videos that are real that people are saying are fake. And it becomes very difficult for all of us to discern what's real and what's not. What strategies are you employing in the AI world?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, over the course of the last year, when we were developing a couple of trainings for the Truth Tellers Project, there were a few innovations that came out with AI video production, and we realized we had to shift our training. It is no longer usually possible for the naked eye to tell whether a certain video is generated by AI. So what we started to do is dig a little bit deeper into the skill set called media literacy and just basic critical thinking and coaching folks to change their habits. When you're on social media, whenever you see something that excites your emotions, that's actually a red flag. Why is this content generated in such a way to make you feel excited? Well, when you're excited or angry or even really amused, you're not thinking as clearly as you might be. So we're coaching folks to say, like, who created this content? So you click on the profile. What can you learn about the source? And is it a reputable source? Is it a mainstream media source that has like a reputational need to be reporting fairly truthful information? There's some, to be argued there, which media source are you looking at? But you can also see sometimes on Instagram, like, this is an AI content farm. You wouldn't know that if you just saw the video, but if you click into the profile, sometimes you can see things like that. So really cultivating media literacy skills, instead of just clicking share, just asking some questions like, do I know why this is being posted? Do I trust the source? And can I independently verify some of the information that's within it?
Yeah. And if you feel yourself getting your blood boiling, really stop and think about who's benefiting from that.
Absolutely.
So if people want to get involved in this effort, how can they find out more information or contact you?
Yeah, well, it's easy to find us. You can Google Sierra Club Climate Truth Tellers, and we should be the first thing that pops up. But you can also go to sc.org/climatetruth, and we have our welcome guide there, and folks can get involved. There's also lots of ways to get involved with the Sierra Club locally, too. The Florida chapter is doing amazing work, and so Sierra Club has many pieces, but the local organizations are doing great work as well, and they're at sc.org/FL.
Well, Jennifer McSharon, it is great to meet you. Thanks for the work that you do. Appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Ann.
All right. Up next, a nod at the past and a look to the future. We preview a special cabaret performance by Bold City Opera.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens presents Art in Bloom, uniting nature and creativity with flowers made of glass, ceramics, paper, wood, and even Lego. On display through September 13th. More information available at cummermuseum.org.
Wolfson Children's Hospital. It's here where hope starts, breakthroughs happen, and lives are changed every day. Wolfson Children's. For any child that needs care, we are always here. Visit wolfsonchildrens.com.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
It's the sound of trust, of calm, of clarity. The sound of WJCT News 89.9, bringing the world to Jacksonville every morning with NPR and local reporting that leads the way.
On the next Fresh Air, actor Will Sharp. He was nominated for an Emmy for his portrayal of Ethan, a tech entrepreneur in Season 2 of White Lotus. He's also starred in the TV show Too Much and the film A Real Pain. Now, he stars as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in a new adaptation of Amadeus. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
The Supreme Court's decision to weaken a key provision of the Voting Rights Act has led to calls from top Democrats to reform the court. They come as public trust in the courts sits at an all-time low. What would reforming the Supreme Court actually take? And what are the arguments against it? That's next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. A performance celebrating encores and evolution is scheduled for this weekend. Here to tell us about the cabaret of the same name is Brandon Smith. He's co-founder and executive artistic director of Bold City Opera. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning.
We're also joined by opera co-founder Christine Alfano, who performs in the cabaret as a featured vocalist. Christine, good morning.
Good morning.
So this show is called a cabaret style. What does that mean in terms of how it's staged, how it's performed? It isn't necessarily cabaret music, right?
So usually we are presenting a fully staged opera production. Historically, that's what we've done. This one is a little bit different. We have hit our 3-year mark, and so we felt it was time to celebrate things we have done. So it's an hour and a half of music, looking back at some of the wonderful projects we've already worked on, and also looking ahead. At other things that we have in mind for the future, and also just a celebration of music.
Congrats on 3 years. That is a big milestone for any creative upstart company. What does it mean to you to have reached this point? It must be gratifying.
So there's a lot of arts organizations that struggle to meet that 3-year mark. As a nonprofit, as an arts organization, that is a huge hurdle to get there. To get to 3 years and get there in a way that's healthy and sustainable. That's been a long-term goal of ours, was if we can just get to 3 years, we're going to learn a lot during that time. We're going to have a lot of growing pains, which are all good. I think growing pains are great for a growing organization. But now we've said we've done the first 3 years. We've got a strategic plan for the next 3 years, and we're just on the beginning edge of trying to make that happen. And as an arts organization, once you've hit that 3-year mark, it becomes a lot easier to access grants. So that's kind of a big turning point for us.
Yeah. Well, as I said, congrats on that. Christine, how does Bold City Opera frame itself in terms of its approach to performance? And I'd just like a little sense of how you selected the performances from the past that you were going to celebrate as part of the show.
Sure. So Bold City Opera, we actually co-founded it in Brandon's kitchen right before I went off to grad school because there was no opera company in town. And we knew we wanted to create an opera company that was approachable and accessible and above all else, very integrated into our community. So all of our productions thus far have really featured regional talent. That's not something a lot of opera companies do. Often they'll hire out for singers who live across the country, which of course, eventually we do want to bring in bigger names, but we always want to make sure we're prioritizing our community and featuring those voices. So our cabaret really, really, really embraces this. You're going to hear singers from Jacksonville, from Central Florida. Most of them have already sung for us before. This, again, as a celebration of what we've been able to accomplish, you're going to hear arias, which is the fancy term for a song in an opera, from past seasons. I'll be singing Senza Mamma, which is a very famous Puccini aria from Suor Angelica, which was our first ever production that we did at St. John's Cathedral. You're going to hear arias from future seasons. I'll let Brandon talk a little bit more about that. But we just really wanted to highlight local singers while also celebrating where we've come from and where we're going.
Yeah. And Brandon, she alluded to a song that she's going to be performing. Talk about what you're planning now for the next upcoming season.
Yeah, so I think we're at a place where we can actually start to. We've got plans in place, so we can start making announcements. We've got 2 operas coming up in this coming season. Historically, we've done one most of the time. We had one season where we did 2, so we've got 2 fully staged productions this year. One by Dvorak, which is an abridged 2-act version of Rusalka, sung in English. Really important to us to have opera be accessible, so we thought we'll do 2 productions, one in English and one in Italian. So November of 2026, we have Rusalka, and in April of 2027, we have Gianni Schicchi by Puccini, which is completely different style. Rusalka is very like fairy tale land, very whimsical.
Think Little Mermaid. It's essentially the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
And then Gianni Schicchi is this uproarious comedy. And Gianni Schicchi runs about an hour. Our abridged Rusalka should run about an hour and a half.
That's
so
what we're
again,
going for.
Yeah, keeping it digestible for new audiences, but also still very satisfying for those who love opera already.
Yeah, so it's something that people who perhaps aren't exposed to the art form, they can kind of find their way with the music that you're presenting. It isn't necessarily something that's alienating. They can have a spot in that audience.
We've chosen to start small for that reason. Our first production, I think, was maybe under 90 minutes. And we wanted to be able to allow people to experience opera. We do not feel like it's an art form that should be exclusive, or that you should have like a baseline of experience to experience. So it's that's why we're starting to gradually increase the kind of scope of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that way our audiences can grow with us.
Well, certainly this weekend's event is a very nice encapsulation of all of the work that you've done and are going to do. It's Bold City Opera. The performance is a fundraiser cabaret. It's called Encores and Evolution. Saturday, May 16th. It starts at 7 o'clock. It's at St. John's Cathedral in Tolliver Halls. Brandon Smith, Christine Alfano, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
All right, and thank you for listening. Join us tomorrow when we discuss how new state DEI restrictions could impact the upcoming city budget in our monthly Ask the Mayor segment. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com.
Constangy, Brooks, Smith & Profit LLP, representing local and national employers in labor, employee relations, and workplace law matters since 1946, with offices in Jacksonville, Tampa, Miami, and Lakeland. More at constangy.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and